Hey everyone, welcome to the program. Before we start, I have a few announcements. First of all, many of you know that I've started a practitioner's training, and it's called Functional Vision Integrative Body. And this has come after 40 years of distilling a lot of information, not only about improving your eyes and vision, but things like brain health, body health, working on a physical, emotional, and spiritual level, using things like color therapy, iridology, craniosacral, somatic movement, and many other things. So I've written up this course for non-eye doctors, so it's a coaching program. And it works for any practitioner. So let's say you're a chiropractor and somebody comes in and they're complaining about their eyes. Well, there are exercises and strategies and educational things that you can teach your clients or patients to get better. I've been working with a few body workers like massage therapists, craniosacral therapists, somatic experiencing therapists, and they're just loving the program. So if you're interested, contact me, appointments at drsamberne.com, and we can have a conversation, see if it's a good fit for you. The other thing I want to mention is my membership program. We're going on year number 3, and what I've done is I've taken a lot of my creative energies that I used to put towards social media, and I've created content that is exclusively for the membership. It's about 20 bucks a month. It's really worth it if you're interested in some of the deeper issues that might be going on, not only about your eyes, but about health, spirituality, meditation, energy medicine, things like that. So if you're interested in the membership, I highly recommend it. You can go to my website, drsamberne.com, and right below the word vision, you'll see membership, and you can click on that. And there's a free 7-day period where you can join and you can peruse the content. What I've started to do over the last few weeks is post my written blogs. I've written a lot of written blogs over the years, and I'm starting to post those in the membership. I know some people like to read, and so we're going to offer you things whether you listen, watch, or read. Reduce the resistance in your quest of the information. The last thing I'm going to be offering, which I've actually started, is some professional coaching in the area of marketing, social media, brand building. I've been very successful at doing those things. In fact, I was recognized by a nonprofit organization here in Santa Fe to offer seminars and do some private coaching. And of course, this is all volunteer, but I want to widen the net. So if you're a health practitioner, if you're a young entrepreneur, contact me. You can go to my business website, iClarityBusinessSolutions.com, and you can read some of my blogs and some of my offerings. And if you want some help in the area of growing your business, I love working with young entrepreneurs. That's what I've done with this nonprofit. Contact me and we can see if we're a good fit. Okay, let's go on to the show today. My number 2 mentor is an optometrist, Albert A. Shankman, Dr. Shankman. You want to know about this guy. So Dr. Shankman was an optometrist. He was a behavioral optometrist who practiced in the Connecticut area. And after I moved back to the East Coast after my internships were over, and I was moonlighting in a lot of different primary care offices, looking for the place where I could start in and open my own office or affiliate with somebody. I remember getting a flyer in the mail, and it was an invitation from Dr. Shankman, and he was saying that He is doing a year-long program for any optometrist who's interested in learning his method of vision therapy. And he called it psychobehavioral vision enhancement. In fact, he wrote a book about it, Vision Enhancement Training, Psychobehavioral Vision Enhancement, if you're interested. And so I enrolled in the course. Now, I was living in Philadelphia at the time, and I had just started a practice there. And in my own vision, I had a couple things going on. First of all, I was very nearsighted. And the second thing is that reading was not something I was very interested in. Even though I was an A student, I did well in school, I was in the National Honor Society, I was never really good at taking, the SATs and, those kinds of tests. And comprehension was not easy for me, reading comprehension. So when I contacted Dr. Shankman and I went up and I had an evaluation from him, I decided I was going to be a patient of his. So I would go up once a month. It was about a 4-hour drive. And I would do vision therapy with him over the weekend. Now, at that time, he was in his mid-70s, so he had sold his practice. And he was living in a retirement community, had a great condo. And his wife, Lynn Shankman, she also worked in his office as a vision therapist. And we became quite close, like family. And every month I would go up there and I would, get an update in my vision therapy program. And then in between, I was doing 20 to 40 minutes every day, 7 days a week, of vision therapy practices that were very different than what I learned in school. They were very involved in movement and balance and working with the eye patch and looking at psycho-emotional and spiritual and energetic reasons around, my own vision problems. And I remember Dr. Shankman said two things to me at my first visit. He said my myopia was a result of the tension that I carried in my eyes as a way to muscle my way to the answer. And that was pretty accurate. Second thing he said is the reason why I wasn't a good reader is that my left eye wandered out. I had very poor convergence with my eyes, especially when I read. And this either leads to confusion, double vision, suppression in the eye. When our two eyes don't work together, the brain gets confused and it tends to suppress, the non-dominant eye. And so I started in his vision therapy practice, and within a couple of months, I noticed that my nearsighted prescription reduced, and it kept reducing. And as I kept reducing, consciousness opened up, insights opened up, things changed for me. And, myopia is related a lot to the kidneys and fear and tension. And I noticed that a lot of that stuff was kind of just evaporating. And at the same time, I also noticed that I was reading better, that my comprehension got better, that I understood what I read. I could read more, I could read faster. And I got to a point 6 months in the program, and he made you commit to a year. And that is actually very important point because, people think, oh, I can go to a behavioral optometrist once and get the changes. And that's not true because the habits and the conditioning and the belief systems around our visual system get ingrained very early on. In fact, our eyes are like, videotape library where we as children internalize our parents' experiences. And Dr. Shankman pointed that out to me, and he was right. And then about 6 months in, I got kind of frustrated because I was very goal-oriented, and I wanted to get to a place where, I want to get rid of my nearsightedness completely. And it wasn't happening. In fact, the more I stressed into it, the worse my eyes got, even though it hadn't been making a lot of progress. So he said to me two things. He said, first of all, you have to give up the goal. I said, I can't do that. The second thing he said to me was, you're too attached to the results and you have to really dive into the process. I was like, oh man, I love results. I want results. That's what I live for. So I wrestled with that. And I remember talking to my brother, and my brother said to me, very smart, he said, He said, well, you paid this guy a lot of money. You've invested all this time. Why don't you just do what he says? Give it up, man. And so sometimes brothers have the wisdom. So I ended up surrendering. Surrendering is a big thing, and letting go, as we all know, because change is constant, right? And we're always changing. Things are always changing. Sometimes it's very uncomfortable, but how can we surrender into and flow with the change? So after I changed my mindset with him, with Dr. Shankman, some magical things started to happen. My eyesight really started to improve. In fact, one day I woke up and I was late to the office. I lived in Center City, Philadelphia. My office was out on the main line. And I was like halfway to the office and I went, oh my goodness, I forgot to put my contacts in and I can read the road signs. So that was kind of like a come to Jesus moment where I was like, wow, I don't really need these lenses anymore. And so we continued on. One of the things that Dr. Shankman recommended that I do is take up meditation, which I did, and I still meditate. And so doing a lot of different modalities along with vision therapy, I completely dissolved my nearsighted prescription, and I was 28 years old at the time. So it inspired me to move into a direction where I was going to exclusively work in a practice where I was helping people improve their vision. Road less traveled, because if I'd gone mainstream, sold glasses, gotten into disease-based care, I probably would have made a lot more money. I would probably, in some ways, in terms of the profession, been more acknowledged. But I took the road less traveled. It's kind of like my modus operandi. I tend to do that a lot. And it set me off in a career where I'm still doing it today, 40 years later, and probably will continue to do it until I physically can't anymore. So Dr. Shankman, kudos to you for giving me so many gifts, and you're right up there in Mount Rushmore with Dr. Sannett. Okay, the third eye doctor I want to talk about is a developmental optometrist who practiced in Florida. I met him when he was in his 70s, and it's an interesting story. His name's Dr. Albert A. Sutton, Dr. Sutton. And when I moved to New Mexico, I had a hard time getting a license to practice because New Mexico is a good old boys state. And it's a poor state, 48th poorest state in the Union. And so they kind of limit the number of outsiders that come in to get a license. And I was having trouble, even though I thought I passed all the tests and I had to retake the national boards, which is a standardized written test. I had to take pathology slides, things like that. So I was at a conference and I met Dr. Sutton and I told him my dilemma. He said, oh, well, I used to be on the state board in Colorado. And here's the strategy. This is what you need to do. You need to call up the president of the board, tell him you're doing vision therapy, behavioral optometry, and, let him get to know you. Don't try to sue him or, get mad at him. Be friends, make connections, network. And so I did that for about 6 months, and magically and miraculously, I got my license after the third try. So New Mexico license is very valuable, not only for New Mexico, but then I recognized that there was a reciprocity deal with New Mexico and Hawaii, so I also have a Hawaii license. And in my next show, I'm going to talk about my relationship with Hawaii and talk a little bit about travel there. I tend to like to go outside of just talking about eyes, so stay tuned for that show. Anyways, Dr. Sutton and I became friends, and I became a student of his. And Dr. Sutton was really a pioneer in the field of development in children, learning, and his testing was very whole body. He had a test called mind-body testing where he tested vestibular, visual fixation, body movement, bilateral integration, many different things. And then he brought two of my now close colleagues from Scandinavia, Lena and Thorkeld Rasmussen, who were doctors of optometry, and they practiced in Denmark and Sweden, and he brought them to the United States, and they taught us the primitive survival reflexes. And the primitive reflexes is such an essential part of vision therapy, especially with kids. OTs, some of them do primitive reflexes. There are a few people out there that are teaching it, but primitive reflexes, those movement patterns start in utero, and the purpose of those movement patterns is to help the newborn adjust to being outside the birth canal in the womb. And many, many kids who have vision problems that are school-aged still have the primitive reflexes. And Dr. Sutton recognized that because he worked with Arnold Gesell at the Gesell Institute. It's a place that I attended in the mid-1980s. And the Gesell Institute was, at that time, a beacon of light for vision development. Now, again, I've talked about the difference between eyesight and vision. Eyesight is eyeballs and glasses and reading the distance chart. But vision is how the eye, brain, and body work together. And there's a developmental process on when kids develop their vision as it relates to learning and academic performance. And Dr. Sutton was an expert at this. He had studied it, and he developed many different protocols. He also got me involved in biochemistry testing, hair mineral analysis, and the importance of the energy in the cell having to be really high, cellular health, to be able to make the developmental changes that are needed, especially in the sensory motor system. He taught at Berry College in Miami, and he was a world-renowned expert in developmental optometry. In my view, he was not recognized enough by optometry. And I remember towards the end of his life, he said to me, take it to the masses, because the optometrists, they're just not ready for this. I mean, they had a hard time understanding. You get on the floor with your patient and you do things like primitive reflexes, and you do craniosacral, and you do, vestibular training. Now I think it's a little more accepted in the behavioral optometry world, but back then it wasn't. And he was way ahead of his time in those things. And I remember I was giving a seminar at a workshop in Florida, and he attended it, and people loved it. They thought I was a rock star. And at the end, it was just him and me. The room was pretty dark, and he said, you've got some holes in your thinking. And I was like, what? He said, yeah, you're not really addressing and understanding the sequence of development in a child's learning. And of course, my ego was bruised by that, but he was 100% right. And so I started to study with him and learned a lot about testing and diagnosing and treating and managing, especially in that developmental model. And to this day, I use many, many of the things that he taught me. One of the places I work is a place called Kid Power, which is in Albuquerque. And it's a place where kids have a lot of special needs, Down syndrome, minimal brain dysfunction, autism, they're in the autistic spectrum. And I apply many of Dr. Sutton's techniques there to this day. And learning those primitive reflexes back then has been such an essential part in being able to help kids reach their potential. So I put Dr. Sutton up on the Mount Rushmore with Dr. Sannett and Dr. Shankman. I've got a few others that I'll talk about in another show, but I think that's a mouthful right now. So I think I'm going to end it here. I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. Share this podcast if you found it helpful. Again, you can go to my social media feeds, and also my website, drsamberne.com. And until next time, everyone, take good care.